Hey there, Pastor Mark here. It's our prayer that this message would encourage and equip you in your relationship with Jesus. We're able to provide this content due to the joyful generosity of our financial partners. And if you'd be willing to join that tribe and help get some sermons like this around the world, you can donate at harvestbaptist.info/give. God bless. We're going to get right to work this morning, though, on the sermon. I don't have much by way of introduction with stories or anecdotes or some note of vulnerability. I got a lot to cover today, so we're just going to dive right in. I'm going to encourage you to kind of buckle up and to get ready, maybe get a pen ready, get ready to put your brain in gear. There's a lot to cover, but I think it'll be a very profitable journey together and will help us understand a bit of the church and what the church is for. And we're in this little mini-series leading up to Easter on what the church is for. And today, our topic at hand is that the church is for contribution in an age of careerism. So we're going to contrast today what is real outside of the church, kind of in the secular world and the workplace, versus what is ideal outside in the workplace. Then we're going to apply that backdrop to the church on what is real in the church and ideal in the church. And you'll see that there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot for us to learn from both outside and inside. So let's begin just simply with what's real outside. In a very strange twist, America is both becoming more lazy and more work-obsessed than ever before. On one hand, you have a lot of young men, especially, entering the workplace who don't know how to work. You have young men who have been taught and trained to play their whole lives, who instead of at 10 years old helping mom and dad with the family farm or the family business or having lots of chores, are playing and video gaming their way through their adolescence. Then they become teenagers, and instead of turning 15 or 16 and getting a job at the coffee shop or the Dairy Queen and beginning to work during the summer and being able to earn some money so that you can pay for your own cell phone bill or save some money to contribute to the used car purchase or pay for your insurance, now I'm obsessed with the hockey team or the travel volleyball team or the baseball team, and mom and dad are funding the sports and the hobbies and the playing and all the equipment and all the $1,000 weekends that go with the travel teams and doing all that instead of learning to work. And then those young people go to college and mom and dad are funding college, or maybe the grandparents are funding college, and lots of guys are majoring in beer and girls, and perhaps they'll get their degree eventually. And wouldn't you know it, those 22-year-olds enter the workplace and they've never learned how to work. And they show up to work and they can't stay off their phone for longer than 20 minutes. I see a lot of heads nodding. Some of you are like, yes, these are the newbies that are coming that we keep hiring. It's driving me crazy. And they're there, and wouldn't you know it, they just continue to play. And then oftentimes they get married and they keep playing. And instead of focusing on maybe their career or their family, that they have inordinate amounts of time spent with golf or with hunting or with fishing or with video games. And I'm not against hunting or fishing or video games or golf. But there comes a point in time where you have to grow up and have some priorities and start to apply yourself and work hard and not be consumed with that, right? It's a weird world when 35-year-olds are spending 4 hours a day who are married, on video games. And yes, I know, to those of you who maybe love that, you're going to say, well, show me in the Bible where it's a sin. And I'm not going to show in the Bible where it's a sin. I'm not arguing it's a sin. I'm just arguing that it's unfitting and that it's dumb, okay? There's nowhere in the Bible where it says don't eat poison ivy. It's not a sin, but it's just dumb, right? It doesn't make sense. So you have a segment of our culture that's like, I think someone needs to teach them how to work. But then you have this other segment of our culture who is throwing themselves headlong into work in an effort to earn more status, earn more notoriety, have more accomplishments. Oftentimes it's fueled by our lust for more stuff. that there's this greed underpinning why we have to take the overtime and why we have to work and do it, because I want more toys and more trinkets and I want to upgrade my house and my standard of living. And we're caught in this consumeristic trap that more stuff is going to lead to more happiness, which just isn't true. And you have these polarizing ends of the spectrum of like, they don't know how to work and they don't know how to stop working. And specifically on the stop working side of things, that has grown increasingly cancerous. There is an article that Derek Thompson wrote for The Atlantic called "Workism is Making Americans Miserable." And he says this, he says that workism is among the most potent of the new religions competing for congregants. What is workism? Well, it's the belief that work is not only necessary to economic production, but it's also the centerpiece of one's identity and life's purpose. And more, if you pay attention at all to our culture, you will see that work has become more profound and increasingly a part of someone's identity. You would see this in subtle ways in the workplaces that we are constructing. And if you know anything about maybe a Google workspace or a WeWork space, that it's not cubicles and offices. It's cubicles and offices with a daycare for your children and a cafeteria and a chef that's there every day to make you free lunch, and a nap pod so that if you get tired, you can go take a nap and then you can wake up and you can go back to work, and foosball tables and hockey tables so you can hang out and socialize. And like even our spaces at work are now intentionally being constructed to, yes, be convenient and yes, have some fun, which I'm not opposed to, but it does structure a place to where people are incentivized to spend more and more of their time there. If you pay attention to what is happening in companies at large, there is a tendency for people to now want to work not just at a place that'll pay their bills and not just at a place that aligns with their skill set and they have a resume to back up why they should get the job, but also, and this is new, a place that's going to align with their political ideology and be a place where they basically have the same worldview. And companies are becoming increasingly exclusive based off of criteria that's very ideological in nature. And employees are wanting to only link arms with companies where people are going to align with my political leanings or my religious leanings. Some of that can be good, some of that can be very bad, because what it does is it makes the workplace far more of a place where you find your identity and your community and your paycheck, and like the workplace was never meant to bear all of that. It was never meant to be a place that is, here's all of my social relationships and my political leanings and somewhere that I can earn a living. It's just not designed for that. And if you look at large of what's happening, we are becoming as a society increasingly focused on what someone does over and above who they are. If you've paid attention to politics over the last 10 years, this would become immediately apparent. I can remember not that long ago in my lifetime where the bar of entry for political service was first and foremost who you were. It was character first. It was, let us examine, do they have a measure of humility? Do they have a life that's in order? And then we will look at what you have done, how successful you've been, how you've been able to lead. We'll look at that, last. That has completely been turned on its head. And it's in line with what careerism is doing to our culture, and that we are now looking at people first based off of what they do, and then second based off of who they are. That's a shift that has been recent for us. And it speaks to how we even accrue social capital inside of an American culture nowadays. You no longer accrue a large amount of social capital because you just do your role well. You are a great father, you are a great mother, you are a great son or daughter. That's not how we accrue social capital now. Now it's based off of how much wealth do you have, how much fame do you have, how many followers do you have, how productive have you been at work, what is your title. That's how we're accruing social capital. Translation of all of this is to say all of this is a relatively dynamic shift in our culture, that we are becoming more and more career-oriented. And we are becoming more and more obsessed with phone. And of course, on top of all these things is just the work creep that has happened to almost all of us, and that now we have this appendage called a smartphone that's tethered to us, and now there is dinging and notifications and text messages and phone calls and emails that has invaded our life, even in our off hours, and work is all over the place. Now you take the reality of what that is in our culture, and there's so many ramifications and implications of all of that, but you begin to contrast that with what the scriptures teach us about what is ideal for us as followers of Jesus and what our roles should be in a workplace, that you begin to see very different pictures. And I want to say you do see a picture just first and foremost. There are some people that would present a hypothesis that God is concerned about what you do at church or with what you do in your off time, but he's not all that concerned with what you do at the workplace or in your career field, which is a bad premise. You are going to spend 2/3 of your life sleeping and working, probably. You do not want to sequester God and your faith away from where you're spending 8, 10, 12 hours in a day repeatedly. You want God to be involved in that, and the scriptures have a lot to say about that. And what they say is ideal is, I'm going to give you a summary, and I'm going to summarize it in 6 words of kind of the biblical teaching of what's ideal for the children of God out in the workplace. And I could give you a sermon on each of these words, but I will do my best to just give you a summary and help you understand it all. And the 6 words are love, dread, kavana, persistence, dividends, and contribution. You say, that's way more than I can remember. I know, I wrote it down for you on your outline so you could take it home and remember it later. Let's start with love. Work is something that we should and we are intended to love. If you read the scriptures, the first verse is, in the beginning God created. Or you could say, in the beginning God went to work. God started to do some stuff. And you find that not only does he do some stuff, that he steps back and he's happy in his work. He will step back at the end of a quote unquote long day of creating, and he will say, that's good. That's very good. Where do you get this inclination inside of you that when you finish the landscaping project and it's all done, it's all in order, the mulch or the rockscape, and it's all done and it's blooming, where do you get this inclination that you want to step back and you not only want to admire your work, but you want your spouse or you want your neighbor to come admire your work too, or even your children? Where do you get this inclination from that when you make a meal and it all comes out at the right times from the oven and from the stovetop and from here, and it all comes together at the right time, it's all warm, none of it's burnt, it all looks good, that you want someone to take that in and to stop and to appreciate that and to admire your handiwork in the kitchen? Like, that's in you. Well, we're designed in the image of God, and we see a God who first, right out of the gate, he works, he makes, he gets his hands in the dirt and starts to make humans. Like, he creates and he steps back and he says that it's good. And we do have this fundamental relationship with work, that it is good for us, and there's something humanizing about it. That we at one hand, we crave it, we love it, we need it, it humanizes us. And this is why you see God give Adam jobs before sin, before a wife even. He tells him, here's what you have to care for. I'm going to give you dominion over it. All the earth, everything here, the fullness thereof, it's all the Lord's, but I'm going to entrust you. And I'm going to give you, Genesis 1, some dominion. Then in Genesis 2, God takes the man and he puts him in the garden. He says, I want you to dress it. And I want you to keep it. I want you to work it. I want you to cultivate it. I want you to care for it. I want you to tend to it. Pre-sin, we have jobs, because jobs aren't bad things. Work is not a dirty word. Work is a good thing. You say, well, help me make sense of why I hate my job so much then sometimes. Well, we also have dread. There's love, but we have to be honest, there's also dread. If you keep reading the story, Genesis 3, sin enters into the world. And with sin comes some curses from God, part of which is that work will now be tiresome. Work will now be difficult. Work will now grade on us and wear us down and zap the life out of us, and it will become a grind. You see in Genesis 3 that the ground is cursed, and you're going to eat of it, but it'll be in sorrow. That thorns and thistles are going to come. That there's going to be sweat on your face in order for this to be productive now. And you have two things at play when it comes to our relationship with work. That deep down we love it, it's part of our humanity and we can't live without it. And deep down we dread it and it wears us down. And both are true. But we are told to lean into working and working hard far more than we're told to lean away from it and to just emphasize the dread. So you have this idea that we should not only begin to work hard, but that we should begin to work hard for our Creator, which is the idea, a Hebrew concept that's known as kavana, not Carvana, the modern car company, but kavana. You can read about this in Alan Hirsch's book called The Shaping of Things to Come, but it's basically the idea that God's people do their work with holy intentions. That whatever we do, not just the clergy, anything that we do it with God's glory as our aim and with some holy intention behind it. That it doesn't matter if you work at a coffee shop or the steel mill or your own small business or a church. No matter where you work, you can bring God's glory to bear. And that Hebrew concept is echoed to the church when you see things like, whatever you do, you got to do it all to the glory of God. If you eat, if you drink, if you work, if you do anything, you have to do it all to the glory of God. And what that means is every job can be, in a sense, redeemed and can become sacred. So if you work at the mill and you are a crane operator or you are in quality control, you are doing more, at least you should be as a Christian. You are doing more than picking up steel packages and transferring them from one point to the next point. You are doing more than walking the line and inspecting the quality for the umpteenth billion time. You on one part of you should say, I am actually part of bringing the creative order forward, that we are taking raw material, we are shaping that into something that now has form and structure and is profitable. We are sending that to people, and we are now making metal spans inside of a gym so that people can play a sport and have an alternate space to have a church service and to have a roof over their head and be protected from the rain and the wind. And what I'm doing, even though it may seem small or trivial or insignificant, this is part of a bigger picture that actually is good for society. But even while I do this, I do it in a way that is glorifying to God with holy intentions. So in a blue collar environment where there is a reputation that perhaps the workers are going to be rough around the edges, perhaps a little grumpy, cranky, sharp with each other, would kind of have this weird joy in running down management and what they want to do, and the lunch breaks are filled with just oodles of complaining about the new policy or the new thing or the new bargaining agreement, and just complain, gripe all the time, that I want to come into my work bearing God's name, and I'm going to be a non-grumbly, non-complaining, non-argumentative. I'm going to be supportive of management, other than them asking me to do something completely immoral, that I'm going to be a salt and light and be different in this workspace and bring God's glory to bear here. Does that make sense? Yeah, I'm working at the steel mill, but I'm doing it with holy intentions. There's kavana, there's God's glory at play here. The same thing is true if you work, say, in a coffee shop and you're 17 years old. We'll, for sake of coffee shops, we'll pick Harvest Moon. Desiree owns the Harvest Moons, and shout out to Harvest Moon, by the way. If you're going to Starbucks, you're missing out, okay? Let's give a round of applause, okay? If you don't know, you need to know, okay? I don't know if Desiree trains her employees this way or not, but I've been there enough to think probably so. You're not taking somebody's order, the end, making an hourly wage at the coffee shop. No, you do that with a holy intention. You don't stand there like a wooden Indian, wait for someone to come in, never greet them, never say a word to them. They're 6 inches from your face, looking at the menu. You say nothing. They give you your order, and you in a monotone voice say, $5.75. No, you understand. I'm taking a coffee order. But that person that walked in, I don't know if they got a cancer diagnosis this week. I don't know if they buried their mom last weekend. I don't know what they're going through. So I have a brief moment with them, but I'm going to do my best to bring some sort of encouragement and life to them. So when they walk in, I'm going to greet them. When they come here, I'm going to look them in the eye and say, how can I help you today? When they give me their order, instead of monotone, $5.75, I'm going to put a little bit of voice inflection on there and maybe a please on the end. $5.75, please. There's a big difference between those two. And when I hand them their order, I'm going to look them in the eye. I'm going to say, thank you for coming here. And you say, that's small, that's insignificant. No. That's a holy intention behind a coffee order. If you're the barista, do we have any baristas in the room? Anyone ever worked as a barista? Can I get a witness? I see a hand, I see a couple, okay. I see a handful. Help a brother out. If they order a latte with some honey in it, don't dump the latte in the bottom of it and not mix it in. Take 7 seconds and mix, I'm speaking from personal experience here, okay? Take 7 seconds and mix that honey into that hot milk so that it tastes better. When you put the lid on, don't put it on screwy. Sink that bad boy onto that cup, because they're going to be in their car and they're going to pick it up from the top and the bottom's going to fall out. It's going to spill all over them. Right? You say putting a lid on a coffee cup can have a holy intention? Absolutely it can. You don't sequester your faith away from your workplace. You bring God's glory to bear in your workplace, no matter what you're doing. That's a biblical idea. And you couple that with the biblical idea that there should be this persistence. That I'm going to remember this and I'm going to work hard. Colossians tells us that in whatever you do it heartily and do it as unto the Lord, not unto men. I remember this idea. I remember that at the end of the day, Jesus is my boss. And if Jesus is my boss, I'm not going to show up late. And if Jesus is my boss, I'm not going to piddle on my phone all day long and not give my company their money's worth. And if Jesus is my boss, I'm going to have a decent attitude while I'm here. If Jesus is my boss, I'm not going to call in sick when I'm not sick. I'm going to come, I'm going to have holy intentions, I'm going to remember that I'm doing it as service unto God no matter what I'm doing, and then I'm going to work hard at it. There's so much biblical press on working hard and the profitability of working hard, but you are told not to throw yourself headlong into careerism. You're not told that, but you are told unequivocally that you better work when you're at work. Everybody wants a paycheck, but not everybody wants to work hard. You work hard. You show up, you put in the time. There's this moment in Thessalonians that you read where, and I'm paraphrasing it, but it basically says, stop talking and not working. Shut your mouth, go to work, and stop asking for handouts from everybody. That's basically what it says. Like, that's a biblical idea, to go get a job and to work hard at that job and to not be lazy at it. And what you find is that customarily, I can't promise you this, but customarily, like the vast majority of the time, if you will show up with a holy intention to serve God in your job and work hard, you'll find that there starts to be dividends. They'll start to pay off. People will start to notice you. People will start to give you more responsibility. The boss will start to trust you more. There'll be promotions, there'll be pay raises, there'll be things that start to come your way. You'll likely start to advance in whatever the company is or whatever the field is, and there will all of a sudden start to be dividends that you're earning now. Proverbs tells us that he becomes poor who deals with a slack hand, who's not diligent, who's lazy about it, but the hand of the diligent, it makes rich. There's this idea ingrained in the scriptures that customarily, if you will show up and work hard, it's going to pay off. And then there's the $1 million question that I have showed up and I've worked hard, and now there's some promotions and there's some pay raises and there's things coming my way. What do I do with this now? And this is where the culture and the scriptures become very divergent. The culture will tell you, good on you, go enjoy it. Bigger house, bigger garage, fill the garage, put more food in the pantry, put more stuff in the attic that you never look at except once every 3 years and tell yourself you need to get rid of it. Like, keep expanding, keep going. Keep upgrading your standard of living. It's a very greedy, consumeristic mindset. And the scriptures will say, as opposed to a greed-motivated careerism, it will say, no. Why don't you go be a person of contribution? Why don't you start to take what God has blessed you with and start to be a blessing to other people? Why don't you purposely choose, voluntarily, to disadvantage yourself so that other people can be advantaged? Why don't you take the resources and the wisdom and the knowledge base and the skill sets and the influence and the authority that you have at work, why don't you take that and why don't you start to leverage that to benefit other people? That's what it'll tell you to do. You'll find scriptures like, honor the Lord with thy substance and with the first fruits of all thy increase, which I love both. There's this biblical concept of when you get an increase, right? When the paycheck hits direct deposit into your bank account, or when you get an inheritance from your granny, or whatever the increase is, that you take that and there's a first fruits concept. There's a portion of this on the front end that I want to actually give back to God and I want to distribute for Him. It's the biblical concept of tithing, or roughly 10%, and deploying that for Him. But it also says that you want to honor Him with all of your substance. It's not like I paid my God tax and I tithe and now I get to do whatever I want with everything else. No, it's like, God, all of this is yours, and how can I use it for other people? How can I be generous? How can I be open-handed? There's 2 verses in Proverbs that I think summarize this very well. It's in Proverbs chapter number 11, and it talks about those who advance and those who find themselves at the top of the class. And when they do it in a righteous way, what those around them see. And here's what it says. It says that when it goes well with the righteous, they get a windfall, they get a promotion, they have more stuff. When it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices. But the wicked, when they perish, they're shouting. The blessing of the upright, by the blessing of the upright, the city is exalted, but it's overthrown by the mouth of the wicked. What this is describing is a group of people who are prospering. It's going well with them. They're being blessed, right? They've risen to the top. They have become successful. They now have wealth or power, or influence, or connections. But what it says is that the people around them, instead of being jealous and envious and mad at them and trying to steal their stuff and take their stuff, it says that the city around them, they rejoice. It's like their win is their win. That righteous person won, but we're winning. And they're happy for them and with them. Why? Because the righteous person understands that I'm getting all these things and stewarding them for the Lord, and I am blessed to be a blessing. I am willing to take all of these things, and instead of just curating a charmed, perfect life for myself and having all of the advantages, I'll disadvantage myself to some degree so that other people can be advantaged. That makes sense? The idea of the biblical concept of work in the Old Testament and the New, it does work. And then you're going to have stuff, and what do you do with that stuff? You contribute. There's, coincidentally, people have long looked at the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, and said, why is it that there's so many, successful people and money and wealth and business leaders? And there's probably a lot of answers to that, but I have a sneaking suspicion that some of it may have to do with like these concepts. that are applicable and will actually work. Now you take what we're supposed to do out there. We show up with holy intentions and hard work, and we don't shy away from earning more or having a promotion, but we use those things to bless other people. And you start to apply that to the church. Is there any similar concept? Does God say that the church should be, somewhat reflective of that? And absolutely he does. And I want to just tackle what is real inside and have some honest moments together. And then what should be ideal inside of the church. You say, is there careerism and people that have an angle and a greedy eye inside of the church? Sure there is. We're not immune from this. I had a conversation with a pastor. He's pastors in Texas, but their church has done a lot of church planting, that every 2 years or so, they're planting a new church kind of within their community and their context. And I wanted to pick his brain, so I met up with him in Atlanta and sat down at the hotel he was staying at and just sat in the lobby and picked his brain for a while. And one of the things he told me was that when we plant a church, they are legally and constitutionally under our umbrella as like the mother church for 5 years. I said, 5 years? That's curious to me. Why not 4 years? Why not 6 years? Why not 0 years? Why 5 years? And he said, here's what we found. I don't have a verse for this. This is just his anecdotal experience. He said, we have found that year 1, wolves will come in. There will be people that will hear there's a new church in town, and they will see it as an opportunity to go be first, get their foot in the door, and get the power positions that they can maybe control down the road, and they're there for the wrong reasons. I said, okay, that makes sense. So why not turn them loose and let them be on their own at year 2? He said, we figured out the same thing at 5 years. There's another group of people who know the church is new, but they don't want to be there through the early days. They don't want to be there through the lean years when they're in the storefront and they don't own any property and there's no nursery for kids yet and all of just kind of the small church hustle. They don't want to be there through that. So they're going to mark their calendars basically and show up at year 4 and 5, and then they're going to try to insert themselves and become the power players. And we have learned we have to have a nose for these people and not allow them to take control. And I just thought, I had never thought about that specifically, and I think there's a lot of wisdom there, and there's a lot of truth to what can happen even in a church context. That there are people who are looking to more or less advantage themselves instead of be a person of contribution. This is even true of pastors. To be completely blunt, I'm not immune from this. I would love to stand here and say, over the course of 8.5 years, every decision I've ever made and everything I've ever said has been purely motivated with no intentions that were slightly to my advantage. I do my best to try to monitor that and to try to kill that and squash that, but I can't say that's never happened. That can happen to pastors, that can happen with congregants, that if you're not careful, there becomes a careerism mindset that begins to possess the church, which should not be. There can be a territorial, that's mine, that's my job, this is what they know me for, and I'm not gonna let anyone else be a part. That's not the way the church is supposed to be. There are 3 things specifically that I think are very less than ideal that perhaps are rooted in careerism that begin to negatively affect the church. One is withdrawal, like an outright, like you've just left the faith. There are people that are functionally apostate who no longer go to church at all, save maybe Christmas and Easter, because they are just so sucked into the black hole that is work. And work has become their religion, and a bad religion at that. One on which you will sacrifice your family, your soul, sometimes even your integrity on the altar of work. That's a really bad trade. So you do see that as a pastor from time to time, that people are literally just like done with the faith so that they can work all the time. You also see withering souls, and this is pretty pronounced, honestly. This may hit home for some of you. That people have become so busy and so hurried, and a to-do list that is so never-ending, that there's just functionally not time for God anymore. I don't mean they stop coming to church. I just mean personally their relationship with God is withering on the vine and their soul is shriveling because they don't have time to dive into the scriptures and read them and study them and meditate on them. They don't have time to pray or just to stop and to listen to God and what he's saying to them. And oftentimes it's not because there's this giant sin in their life that is eroding their relationship with God. It's just because they're so busy. Corrie ten Boom was famous for saying that if the devil can't make you sin, he'll keep you busy. Because functionally, they'll both do the same thing. They will isolate you away from your relationship with God. And we are, as a culture, like so quick to just schedule ourselves to death and fill our calendars with everything. And we end up paying the price for it on the inside. You also see, though, just work creep. People who perhaps they're working for their relationship with God in their own time, but work has become so possessive of them that now to have time to even be in a small group, to have time to go serve, it becomes very difficult for them because work has crept into every nook and cranny of my life. And there's probably a handful of you, if not more, that would say, man, I'd love to sing in the choir, or I would love to play an instrument, or I'd love to jump into the Embrace Space special needs ministry that we have launching here come April. And if you're a part of that, I know many of you have a training today specifically for that. I'd love to do that. I just can't. I don't have the time. I'm too busy with work and all that's going on that I just functionally can't pull it off, and you end up trading work for any version of service in the community at all. Those are poor trades. You say, well, then what's it supposed to look like? What's it ideal inside? Well, there's a lot I could show you, but I'll just give you 1 Corinthians 12. That's where we turned. Remember, like at the very beginning of the sermon? Here we are. We found our way there. I think this will speak for itself and be enough. This is specifically talking about blessings, gifts that God has given to Christians and what we are supposed to do with them. Most specifically, the context of spiritual gifts, but to apply it in a broader sense would not be inappropriate. And here's what it says, verse 7. The manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. God has manifested his Spirit and has gifted you, and he's done it so that there is profit in the whole. You get that? He's giving you some gifts so that you can employ them, not just enjoy them. He's giving you some stuff so that you can not have a toy to play with, but a tool to build with. You need to go profit the whole with what he's given to you. It's the same concept of contribution, that you open-handedly share what God has given you to bless others around you inside of the church community. He goes on to say in verses 24 and 25 that it's God who's tempered the body together, verse 25, that there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care one for another. Communicating the same idea that God has put Tim in the church and Dom in the church and Dan in the church and Brian in the church and Jamie in the church and Joe in the church so that they can bring the whole and bring health and cohesion to the church, and that they can serve other people. They can bless the whole, they can bless other people. And the church is this place where on one hand you are blessed, and people teach you, and people pour into you, and people mentor you, and you hear sermons, and maybe nursery workers watch your kids in the nursery, or teach your kids in junior church, or someone else greets you, or someone else makes the coffee, and you're grateful for all that, but you take your gifts and abilities and talents and skills and resources, and you try to reciprocate and bless other people. That make sense? It's supposed to be a community of contribution. Church is never intended to be a place where people come and they just sit on the sidelines. And they become a proverbial Dead Sea where everyone pours into them, but they never funnel out to anybody else. That's not it. That's not God's plan for your workplace and what you do, like in your, like the community at large or your neighborhood. And that's not God's plan for what we do in here. It is the same basic premise of He blesses and rewards and gifts and equips us, and we take all of that blessing and we seek to go disadvantage ourselves for the advantage of somebody else. So let me challenge you in very practical ways to first and foremost not be a person who sits on the sideline. And if you're new to church, I understand there's a period where it's like, I'm brand new, it's my first week, it's my third week, I'm just kind of checking this place out and seeing what is. I get that. No one's expecting you to show up and do a nursery shift on week 2, okay? But I don't know exactly how long that takes, but we're gonna max it out at 6 months, all right? It should be that within half a year, barring some sort of season of life where you just can't for reasons that are outside of your control, 90+% of the time, there should be some contribution. That if you have a gift, an ability, something to bring to the table, go put it to work. You say, well, what do I have? Well, probably more than you think. You have a paycheck? You say, are you greedy? Is the budget behind? No, I'm not greedy. The budget's not behind, and we got plenty of money in the bank. But there's a concept that even financially, we take what God's given to us and we begin to give and we begin to bless. I was particularly joyed and blessed. There's a number of data points that we do track behind the scenes every month. And I went back to when our fiscal year started. With our school, we run our budget cycle from August through. And I looked over the last 5 or so months, how many people have begun giving for the first time here at the church, because every month there's a number. And I added them up, and there were 58 different family units that over the last 5 months have begun giving something, I don't know what it is, but something to the church for the first time. And I think that speaks to people coming in and people understanding, hey, I want to be a part, I want to contribute some way, shape, somehow. That's a good thing. I would encourage you, if you're like, yeah, we did for the first time. I don't know if you're familiar with the giving ladder, that concept, but it's basically when you give to a church, normally there's a first time, and then you generally will go up the ladder to the next rung, which is like occasional. Like, oh, there was this initiative, so I gave to that, and then the sermon was really good, so I put a tip in, and you become a little sporadic in your giving, and eventually you go up a rung and you start to be consistent. I'm like, no, I'm gonna do this consistently. We're gonna put it in the budget. We're gonna start to work on this, which is good growth. Hey, I want to do something consistently. We even have, I know, scores of you that are online kind of a system on our website. You can have recurring giving, where you can just set it almost like a bill pay every week, every 2 weeks, every month. And especially if you're prone to forget or you're looking to go from like sporadic giving to consistent, I would encourage you to think about that. It can be a practical tool to help you just have a consistent rhythm when it comes to generosity. And eventually that grows to people who understand, like, I'm gonna tithe. This don't make sense to me, but I'm gonna take like a percentage of my income, like 10%. And my mic is having a seizure. I'm going to take this, I'm going to like start to set it aside and start to give it. But then there's so many of you who are above and beyond that. You're just generous. It's like, I don't know if I'm gonna give away 20% of my income or 50% of my income this year, but I'm just gonna be generous and I'm gonna listen to God and I'm gonna give. Like, those are good things. You can contribute in a financial way, and you should in a financial way. You should take pay raises and not just upgrade your standard of living and say, okay, new car, bigger piece of land, we can stop shopping at Walmart and go to Whole Foods finally. Like, you can upgrade your standard of living, and you can also upgrade your standard of giving. Those are fair things for Christian people to do. And I'm not against a new car, I'm not against you shopping at Whole Foods, okay? Don't misunderstand me. But you need to think through, how do I contribute? Does God have access to that? Think about your resources. So you already spent the stuff, and there's already a side-by-side in the garage that you love to go to West Virginia and drive the trails on. Or there's a safe, a gun safe, and then there's another gun safe, and they're both stocked full. Take a buddy out and go to the shooting range with them. Share it with them. Your neighbor who doesn't have a chance to take his 8-year-old out on the trails, let him borrow your side-by-side. He may wreck it. He may. But let him borrow it. Take your resources and bless other people. Go be the mayor of your neighborhood, right? Invite the people over to the barbecue at your house. Host it, pay for it, don't have a cover charge. Just bless them. Like, take what God has given you. My wife and I, we're not fostering right now, and this is not a toot, for us. It was just something in years gone by that we've done on multiple occasions that's been a practical outlet for us to take our resources and say, I think God could use them this way. That, hey, there's a house, and it's big enough to have another person in another bed. And there's a minivan. We already got 4 kids. 6 of us in a minivan it's relatively full, but legally there's another seat in the minivan. We don't have to buy another vehicle. We already have the strollers and stuff from the baby years in the basement. Like, feeding 6 people or feeding 6 people plus another 4-year-old is pretty much the same meal. So functionally for our family, that became something that we kind of have the resource package already baked into our life. We can take this and probably be a blessing to somebody else. And yeah, there's gonna be some visits and some training, and there's gonna be some disadvantaging of ourselves to some degree to make this happen, but we feel like these are resources that we have at this stage of life that we can use to be a blessing. Do that in your context. I don't know exactly your context. I'm just saying he's given you resources, go use them. Go be a blessing. Some of you have a knowledge base and wisdom that you have gained over the years. You have a lot of workplace trainings. You have books that they've made you read, and you've developed some wisdom. Deploy that. Deploy that at work. Take the newbie who doesn't know the ropes and doesn't know how to work very hard and put them under your wing, and don't demand that your boss give you part of their pay because you're doing part of their job. And you're doing some mentoring. Go freely offer that. Go bless them. Go take the financial wisdom that you've learned, and when we offer a Financial Peace University, volunteer to run it and to try to help other people in their finances. Take what you've gotten over the years and bless other people with it, just in your knowledge. Do some mentoring. Some of you have skill sets and you have crafts that you have honed. Deploy those. I'm so grateful for every voice and for every instrument that's played, because every single one of those, you know what's true of them? They didn't join the orchestra and had never played an instrument before in their life, at least none that I know of. Maybe that's true, but none that I'm aware of. Those were skill sets that were, Mom made me take piano for 6 years in a row and I hated it, but I learned something and I could probably still put it to use. And I know how to read music now. Right? I'm so grateful for those skills, and it takes time to show up and to practice and to make it all happen. But hey, I have a skill set. I can play a violin, or I can play a guitar, or I can play something. I can sing. Let me go use that for somebody else. Some of you have the world's most gorgeous smile, whether the orthodontist gave you that or whether God gave you that, or maybe a combination of both. But go use it. Go be a greeter. Take your smile. Don't grow the world's largest beard over top of it so no one can see your teeth anymore. Go use your smile. Some of you love kids. Jump into kids ministry. And if the opposite's true, don't, right? If you don't like kids, please don't serve in kids ministry. We don't want you there. If you're happy but your face doesn't know it, do not be a greeter. We need happy people there. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Survey your life, take inventory, and say, how can I contribute to other people? In my job, in my community, in my church. We want to be in an age of careerism, in an age of consumerism, in an age of greed. We want to be people who are contributors. And I dare say it'll mark us and we will stand out. I hope to God that there are people in your neighborhoods that would say, I may not agree with them on everything. Religion, faith, God, Jesus, I don't know that I buy it, but I'm sure glad they're part of our neighborhood. Because they jumped on the HOA board and they're not the cranky Karen who's constantly barking at everybody because they broke this minuscule rule, but they're actually helpful for the HOA in the neighborhood. I hope that in our community, There'd be people that say, I don't know that I'm on about what those harvest people are on about. I don't know that I believe all the Bible and all that sort of stuff, but I'm sure glad they're here. I'm glad that they are weaving themselves into the fabric of our society and that they're blessing people and helping people and ministering to people and serving them and being benevolent towards them. Like, I want me and my family and you and your family and our church to be that place where we contribute to others. Because, and I'm done, if there was ever a model of someone who disadvantaged himself to advantage other people, we may have that in Jesus. I think the devil wants to mess with my mic, right? I started talking about money, I started talking about Jesus, and that mic starts going crazy. There's a demon in this mic somewhere. If anyone has some holy oil, please let us know. We need to anoint it after this. But we know Jesus took heaven and became man. I dare say that was a little bit of disadvantaging himself, that he humbled himself, that he became obedient to a death on a cross, and he takes all of his righteousness and assumes our sin so that we can have eternal life and forgiveness of sins and a home in heaven. If there were ever a people who got what it meant to contribute to others, even if it's at our own cost, Christians should be those people.